Welcome to Parallax. Parallax, the construction amidst eternal decay. Parallax, the portal to the edge of chaos. Parallax, poem and provocation.
So welcome, Luke Behncke to Parallax Podcasts. You are a frequent guest, and you've done many courses with Parallax related to Gurdjieff, mostly. The last one was making a link between Gurdjieff, the works of Gurdjieff, George Gurdjieff, and Christianity. And your new course has a very provocative title, which I love always. Why the World Hates Christianity. So, Luke, why does the world hate Christianity?
Well, it's been hated right from the very start. Jesus Christ brought something in the way that he brought it, which really strikes to the heart of human kind of egoism and really turned the world upside down. And so the early church was very much persecuted for at least the first 300 years, and it seems to have been sort of hated ever since. And particularly over the last, at least from what I've been able to see, the last 20 to 30 years from a number of different angles. Some of it's been justified in the sense of some of the scandals of the church, but there seems to be something that's there beyond politics, beyond culture wars, something that's really right at the heart of the Christian faith and what Christ brought, which seems to force everybody to confront. There's no neutral ground, and we're seeing it sort of more and more. And there's a real question here for me. What is that? What are some of the underlying energies, the underlying forces there, which really divide? One either loves Christ or hate it. One either comes to the church or there's a hatred for it. And so what is that? And can we explore that in such a way as maybe we can come into contact with some of these energies and forces within ourselves? And maybe it might throw a little bit of light on our human journey over at least the last 4,000 years and what it might mean, particularly in all of the chaos that seems to be around us, particularly in the West. So there's a real question mark here for me. It's not just a statement, why does the world hate Christianity? But it's also a question, because it's unlike a hatred that any other faith or a religion really gets exposed to or is experienced from.
Okay,
So,
let me stop you there because I think that's where maybe people would object. They would say, people hate, Islam because for whatever reason, people hate Buddhism for whatever reason. There's a hatred towards religion in general in the, let's say, Enlightenment era as either being, authoritarian or being outdated in terms of the knowledge that we know today. So again, the particularity of Christianity. So what is it? Why are you making that strong statement about Christianity as opposed to the other world religions?
well, I think the hatred is much more prevalent with the Christian faith than any others. That's not to say many other kind of religions or faiths in general don't or are open to.
Like Islam, people are very virulent against Islam at the moment, right?
Yeah, but what's interesting is it's okay to attack Christianity, but not Islam. And there's, a number of
Yeah.
famous examples. Alex
Yes.
O'Connor, for example, has admitted that he's more comfortable attacking the Christian faith than any others. Richard Dawkins, the same way. So it's just interesting that the Christian faith, in a sense, opens itself and welcomes kind of persecution. It welcomes criticism. Other faiths, even though they might be exposed to it or experience it, may not sort of necessarily be open to it. So that's interesting. And it also seems to be, at least over the last little period, over the last, kind of 20 years or so, a relentless assault on the Christian faith. And there's, at least for me, this interesting question, what's the difference here? If there is some? Jesus Christ, what he brought 2,000 years ago in the way that he did, so not only the gospel message, but the acts, the events that surrounded his life, his death, his resurrection, his ascension, seems to be something that the modern mind just can't handle. It also seems to have, at least through history, unleashed something in the last 2,000 years, which has shaped the Western world, for better or for worse. But what I do know is that this is the best time to live, at least in the Western world, with all of the comforts, all of the standards of living that we have, unlike any other time where, your life would have been relatively short and filled with illness and injury. So the Western world, in a sense, has borne a lot of the fruit of that early faith, as well as a lot of the scandal. But it seems to persist. And particularly in the West, this relentlessness, this kind of hatredness, it's almost like we're eating ourselves from the inside out, but yet not really able to replace it with anything.
Yes.
But again, this is more of that kind of cultural, kind of political level. So what I'm really putting into question, and what the course is hopefully going to explore, is what are some of the underlying forces, those hidden energies which seem to be there and which seem to surface, and that we have a particular response or a reaction to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A way in which I agree with you is the fact it seems to me that the secular world at the moment is more and more revealing its impotence
Yeah.
in terms of being able to provide, meaning for people. Of course, much of the meaning for people has been historically in Christendom and worship and all of that. Um, so so again, we're living in this world where sort of everything's happening all at once. All of the boundaries and of what was let's say what you could define as the Western Christendom. It doesn't exist in the same way it used to. It's not in schools. It's not in politics. It's pretty much been banished from and you can be a believer on the side as long as you don't talk about it and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so do you see a kind of a return, or do you see now that the sort of secular world is collapsing? At least I think that I think a return to some kind of religiosity seems necessary, again, for better or worse.
Yeah. I certainly see the opportunity arising, and maybe this is part of the cycle. The West has, borne the fruit of the last 2,000 years, and then when it slowly eats itself and can't find a substitute for that meaning that help people in all sorts of ways. And that meaning is a real food. It is an energy. It's not just an idea. Meaning fuels us. It feeds us. It nourishes us. There's something very tangible about it. And so to try to substitute it with a lesser food is like going from good, wholesome, natural food to some kind of fast food. And then from there, it really just leaves a bad taste in one's mouth. That's even if you can find anything to eat. And maybe the West needs to go through this. Maybe it needs to see that meaning can't be fabricated. We can't create God. We can't find these things and make them for ourselves. That
That
all
seems to be it.
along,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
yeah,
the notion of creating God, this seems to be where the divide is.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, it's part of the golden calf. It's part of the techno majors of the world. It's the transhuman agenda that we can turn ourselves into gods. That God is just something that we create for ourselves in order to live out this life. But that's a fallacy because that can't feed us, not in a deep, meaningful way. And so I think the West needs to go through this. It needs to be drunk on itself for a while. It needs to come to that point where there is nothing left in the tank, that maybe it realizes that it needs to be fed again and fed in a very different way. And maybe then that is that return. Maybe that can till the soil that can allow new seeds to grow.
hmm, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, it's interesting. Someone said to me something similar, like there's a all-pervading pessimism, like it seems in culture. People feel that they're doomed. There's this expression, doomers. People feel that the world is falling apart, and on every level, right? On the
Yeah,
level of meaning, on the level of ecology, on the level of even art or culture or education. There's a sense that, let's say, if the Christian myth has any meaning, it's sort of like we're going through this death, right?
yeah,
And then hopefully there'll be a resurrection, you know. Um,
yeah, yeah. We're crucifying
yeah,
ourselves
so
in a
that's
way.
built into the Christian myth. It seems its own death.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting, this birth death cycle. This isn't the only time in period where, the Christian faith has waned or it's moved and all sorts of things that have sort of happened. But it's just interesting in the globalized world that we're in. It's just much more apparent that we're rising and falling together and not just in sort of uh, uh, places around the world, that we are all in this spaceship arc called Earth, and it affects us with all of the technology that we have. We can literally feel ourselves across the other side of the world. There's a response, an energy that then moves. And maybe it is like that. Maybe we're going through as a species our own death and hopeful resurrection. But in that death, like with Christ, it was incredibly painful, prolonged, and agonizing.
Hmm.
So
So,
that's that interesting part of the Christian myth, that this birth, death, this rebirth, this coming into something anew in one sense is very much paralleled with each individual life and also the collective life. So maybe we're feeling that. Maybe all of that myth has been sowed into our soul, if you like, over the last 2,000 years. There has been something into the bloodstream of our species that is able to recognize that we're all of this doom and gloom can't last, and I've certainly spoken to many people that they feel as though that something dreadful is going to happen. But what's interesting is there's always some end in sight. Something, it'll be a war. It will be some, I don't know, three-eye atlas heading
hmm,
at us. Something that is going to bring a stop to it, because it can't go on forever. There needs to be something that will either intervene or something new that comes into the world. But to persist in this nihilistic form with all of these illusions just can't survive.
yeah. So maybe we could talk about, without, giving away what you're going to do in the course. There's 3 sessions. The first session is called The Offense of Christ. So, just in a nutshell, what is the offense of Christ? Like, why why is he so appealing and attractive to, let's say 1 billion people who believe he's a living God? And why is he so offensive and horrific to other people? Like, what's the offense of Christ?
Yeah, well, the backdrop to it is, and we'll explore this in that first course, of what led up to it. All of the energy, all of the cycles, all of this birth and death um, that preceded it for the last 2,000 years, I would suggest much further back. And certainly if I lean into Gurdjieff, it was much further back. And then all of a sudden, when Christ appeared, which he appeared at a time that was the first time that someone like him could appear, that he unleashed something into the world. And so the offense is what he claimed, that he was the Son of God, the Son of Man. He was the way, the truth, the life. And so these very bold claims don't leave much room for neutral ground. And so it becomes offensive. It becomes offensive of why? Why does one need to submit to something? Why does one need to acknowledge that if Christ or this power or this energy or this force is the way, the truth, and the life, it becomes offensive because it turns my own world upside down. It really stabs to egoism. Why can't I just live the way I want to live? And back then, to love thy neighbour, to love thy enemy, was just a radical claim that not only ancient minds, but also modern minds just can't wrap their head around. And so that energy that was unleashed.
Well, you say
If it,
also
if it,
modern minds. Again, we'll let you finish. Sorry, excuse me.
sorry, just the last part, this offense, that this energy that was unleashed, the Holy Spirit, the Holy Fire, whatever you want to call it, if it was released out into our species, then everyone's confronted by it in a very tangible, energetic way. And one can either accept and be receptive to it in some way, shape, or form, or if one is not able to receive it or able to integrate it into oneself, then it must be rejected. That is, it's just offensive. And so right from the get-go, there was either one loves Christ or one hates him. And there's a division. And that was interesting in the ancient world, how that fueled that, because it really calls to something. It's not so much something we work out with our mind. It's something we feel. It's a change of heart. It's an openness to receive something of a higher nature. And if one is unable to do that for whatever reason, then it must be rejected because it's just too much.
Yeah. So, it's not, that's not how I feel. I don't feel this either. I have to reject Christ or I have to hate him because I'm a Buddhist. I love Christ, but it's not my, I feel that that's available in other forms. So this is, so I don't mean to be, I don't want to be arguing with it. So I have much sympathy for and love of Christianity, even though it's my chosen faith. So is Christ the Nazarene guy who lived in Bethlehem, or is Christ some kind of principle that comes way before that? Or because you often say that, or Gurdjieff says that Christianity predates the man, Rabbi Jeshua or whatever in Nazarene in the Nazarene times.
Well, no, it's a good question because it comes into the second part of the course that we do the following week, that Christ is not the church. The church cannot contain Christ. Christ is not the man, though there was an incarnation of Christ 2,000 years ago.
Yes.
But Christ being the second person of the Holy Trinity, the one God, there is something where God came to earth, the divine became a man or became human. So humans had a pathway to become divine. And so that's interesting because it really opens up this question, well, what is Christ? Who is Christ? And where everything then becomes very mixed is that the Christian faith as we know it, which normally people identify with as the church, can never contain Christ, ever. It might be a funnel, a conduit. It might be a river with which the Holy Spirit might flow, but Christ is outside of all of that. And so it then begs this question, well, maybe Christ has come in many forms, or maybe the energy, maybe the power, the force behind Christ has come in many forms in order to seep into, in its kind of various ways, as many people through our, or at least through the last 2,000 years, as much as Christ possibly could. Maybe the church is just one conduit for it. Maybe it was needed. Maybe it was a main branch, if you'd like. But all of the tributaries, all of the ponds, the pools, maybe the great ocean, if Christ truly is the Alpha and Omega, truly is that which kind of governs the world, then Christ cannot be contained to a form. And so I have a question that if that energy is there, maybe it's had to come to people in very different ways and in very different forms.
Maybe even in Buddhism.
Maybe.
So,
It's interesting how most religions, or most of the mainstream ones, have adopted Christ in some way, shape, or form. Christ consciousness is one of those phrases which, gets kind of bandied around because it's able to recognize that Christ is more than Jesus the man.
yeah.
The earthly
So
man had something to do, but the Christ is something else.
yeah, so Buddha nature is love, right? Which is Christ. So I could use those two as synonymous. That's okay with me, but that's just because I have a different, perhaps chosen path than you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and this is something, and I, as I said, don't want to give too much away, but it's this looking to explore the event of Jesus Christ, or the events, because there were several, of what led up to it, and then everything that happened afterwards, to look at that in a different way, to look at that potentially this was part of a much greater work, a much greater kind of oversight, if you'd like. And so that then becomes interesting to try to unhook, if you like, all of the shackles that have kind of been built up around Jesus Christ because of the institutions. And that's not trying to criticize all of the various churches, but when you just park all that to one side, if you just read the Gospels as they are, if you just try to think about this man and what he claimed and what he did, and to think about it in terms of forces and energies, it might just help to open up some other questions, because those same energies and those same forces are with us now. They may not have been there 2,000 years ago, but we're all used to it, and they're here with us now. And Christ said in the Gospels that what he brought, he didn't bring peace, but he brought a sword, and that it would divide everyone. So he knew from word go what would unfold, but what also would be needed, that maybe this division helps to spread something out, helps to differentiate, diversify it, so it's able to come back into more of a whole.
Hmm. So, yeah, so there's an inevitable disillusion of all our familiar common mechanical structures. You're a Gurdjieffian, so it's the breaking apart of perhaps our mechanical structures or our unconscious structures to allow this, what you call theosis, right? Um, my question is, why is it the hardest way? You call it the hardest way, and that's the title of your third session.
Yeah.
Why this emphasis on hardness? Being, why is it all about, the death and crucifixion and not about, a good time?
Well, I think there's much joy there. I do think there's much joy, and we'll explore this in the last course. But there's something, unlike most other religions, and I can't think of any other, um, but particularly for Christ, the events and what he taught in the gospel was bringing heaven to earth, not to transcend, not to view earth or flesh as something impure and bad and that we need to transcend, which really means to escape,
Mhm.
but to embrace, to be able to bring heaven, to bring these higher forces, these higher kind of energies into our plane that can literally transform us and our planet and all life on Earth. So this act, this task, this great work is not something that is terribly easy. Nigh on, it feels as though it's almost impossible to do, particularly when we look at our world and the chaos and wars and violence and everything else. How could possibly we could bring heaven to earth? But yet, in many, many ways, it's talked about that that's what humans are for. We are a bridge. We need to have one foot well and truly on earth in the flesh and one foot well and truly in heaven, and to help bring them into alignment, to help bring them to integrate, to help bring them in some relationship that is then able to help our world as it is, as well as something that potentially comes after this earthly life stops. And so, in that sense, the tangible fruits, if you'd like, of that task can be measured. It can be weighed. It's not something that happens after you die. So, in a sense, what Christ brought and hopefully what the Christian faith should be doing is bearing those fruits. How do we make this earthly life better for ourselves and for others? By bringing this heaven, by bringing these higher energies down. And so this notion of communion and union with God, this notion of being this bridge, ends up being quite essential. Because how do we transform this earth? Well, we're only mere humans and we need a great deal of help. And that help must come from a source that is greater than us. And then that's one of the hardest first steps, is to accept that maybe I'm not as good as what I think I am. Maybe I'm not as important as what I think I am, and I need to find a way to ask for this help. That maybe this help can come, but this help must come through me. So I
Or,
need in some way to be transformed in order to allow that to happen.
or maybe, what about the notion that you mentioned about Gurdjieff saying that, God needs our assistance, or that we are actually valuable to God in some kind of way because we're also providing the bridge, right? So without the bridge, heaven remains heaven and earth remains earth. They remain
Yeah,
separate. right?
Yeah, and that's the great kind of division, right? That's the great war of heaven. That something early on split apart, and kind of Gurdjieff talks about this in his own way. But very much his notion of a soul and the purpose of acquiring one and working towards one is this bridge. It's saying that there is something earthly, the physical body, that's needed, but there's also something which is kind of beyond it, but needs to be incorporated within it so that both can help one another. And so this is this great, the ecology of consciousness, if I was to
Mm.
put it like that, that in a way, and he speaks about this, that God needs us in order to help run his world. We're not just a pawn in some great crazy game. We're structured in such a way as that we're the only ones, at least at this moment in time,
Mhm.
that is able to assist in this endeavor to try to bring these worlds closer and to be able to align them in such a way that both the earthly realm, if I call it that, and the heavenly realm are able to be with each other. And so that begins with us. So it's not leaving this earth behind. It's not saying it's impure and it's no good and only God is good and trying to transcend. No, it's trying to transform right here and now. It's saying there is something that's needed here, and the offense is that we can measure it. And Christ talks about fruits of one's labor. Gurdjieff talks about the same thing. If we're on the wrong path or we're not doing the helpful things, we'll see it because it will be plainly in sight for us on this earthly plane, which I think if you look across the world, we're not doing a terribly great job.
Yeah. Um, but again, all hope is not lost because
Because, and this probably comes back to our earlier point, that maybe we need to come to this point where we've lost all meaning, that we're not as good as what we think we are, despite all of the technology that we have, all the power that we have to kill each other, that at the end of the day, we still need help and a
Mhm.
great deal of it. And maybe that opens us to something. Maybe that is, in a sense, the requisite need, if you'd like, for something else to really come in at a species level, that there needs to be a birthing point. There needs to be at least a critical mass of people who are open to the idea of what Christ and other kind of religions have brought.
Mhm.
That we haven't grown up.
Yeah. So do you think it's a critical mass, or it's a few, it's a just a few bunch of people? Like if you look at the disciples, they're a bunch of backwards guys in some, desert town. They seem to have had a pretty big effect on the world. But
Yeah.
nobody would have guessed that perhaps at the time.
No.
I tend to think it's not about numbers. It's about a few people with integrity, and that's what turns the world towards this heaven you're speaking about. But
Yeah.
maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it has to be a group. I don't
And
know.
look, I don't know. I use that term critical mass because it's one of those, is it one or is it 1,000 or is it 1,000,000? I don't know.
Yeah,
Gurdjieff said, maybe a bit tongue in cheek, that 200 conscious people in the world at any one time, if there were such people, could
yeah,
stop wars.
yeah.
And so it really sort of begs this question, which I always think is a matter of quality, not quantity. But the world has changed in 2,000 years. We
Mhm.
have many more people,
Yeah.
many more resources. We're in this globalized world where we're all linked to each other in some way, shape, or form, whether we like it or not. That maybe the inertia with all of that does require a critical mass that's at a quantum that might be in the thousands or millions. I don't know. But what's interesting is there does seem to be this sense that everything will come to a point. This can't go on like it is.
Yeah.
Where that point is, whether it's 10 years from now, 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, I don't know.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, then the next question would be, what do we do to generate that um let's say Christ consciousness, Buddha nature, whatever you want to call it. What is the way that Jesus is talking about? Yeah.
Well, I think this is a question in a sense for everyone, whether you're Christian or not, or it's, for me, it's this needing to relook in a very serious way what it was all about, to try to park as much as we can of all of the baggage that has accumulated over the last 2,000 years, some of it helpful, some of it unhelpful, but to try to come to Christ anew, which is really difficult because there is so much of that history and kind of baggage with it. And to try to explore as faithfully as one can and as maturely as one can,
Hmm.
what was he really saying? Not what pastors say or priests say or the church say. What was he saying? What was he trying to convey?
Yeah, there's something very ironic about Christianity in the sense that Jesus' message is so incredibly radical, and yet it's become the biggest religion in the world. So that this radicality doesn't seem to be something that the average Joe can really adopt. I was wonder about that. Like, as you say, it's the hardest way. Who wants that, right? Nobody
Yeah.
wants that, right? We don't want that.
Well, well,
We want to
Christ
live a
and
good life, and
yeah, no, I mean, I mean, my impression, Christ has been kind of watered down a great deal. He's seen as a pious kind of peacemaker that, that doesn't interrupt anyone.
no, he was
But
an angry dude.
you, you read the Gospels, it was anything but. It was anything but. That doesn't mean that there wasn't holiness in there
Yeah.
and the other things which are normally attributed to him, but he was really trying to get to the heart of the problem. And he was really trying to address, if we don't address our own egoism, if we don't address those things which contribute to all of us either hating each other or killing each other, then that will just go on and on and on. And so we need to find another way. And in order to do that, we need to look in. The kingdom of God is within you. And the way, the truth, and the life was, he was the earthly example. He gave up his life. He didn't start wars. He wasn't rich. He was pretty poor, had a group of, as you said, kind of uneducated Jews with him, and they just had a very different message, which was radical. And he pursued it to his own death willingly. And then
Yeah.
something happened, and then these small group of Jews all of a sudden were emboldened and was able to spread the gospel like wildfire, which is interesting. So there's something in that. It's not about being a passive Christian and trying to meet everybody's needs and really not being able to meet anyone's needs. It's about no. It's about really going to the heart of things and being fearless and having courage and being persecuted if that's needed, but always
Yeah.
speaking the truth. And
It-
that's been lost.
mm, sure. Well, we have a lot of fear, in modern culture. We're full of fear because we're exposed to fearful messages and images and in our education system. And so heroicism of Christ, um, and the sort of absolute integrity of that, uh, is definitely, it's an extremely rare thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
But it's a model.
it's it's a model, and I mean I put it into question myself. What would I genuinely give up my life for? And of course, that's an uncomfortable question because I might say, "Oh yes, of course I'd die for this. I'd die." But in a quiet place, I'm not sure. In a quiet place, I'd still want to save my own life. And so some of these questions are quite confronting. And so it's easier to run away from it, or it's easier to water what Christ said down as, just some guy who said some nice things and that was about it. But no, he really did bring a sword, and it was a painful one. And I think that's why it's the hardest way, because his way is the hardest way. How to give up those things, how to die before you die, how to be reborn again, how to lose your life in order to find it. All of these that just seemed impossible things, yet he tried to put these things to people in order to put them on the spot. It's not what you say, it's what you do.
Yeah. Mm.
And that requires a certain amount of energy. That requires forces. That requires something in us to be able to respond. Words are not enough. Words are not enough.
So, well, that's great. I mean, that's fun. Let's just please come and join this course. It's going to be a blast. We'll do some live crucifixions and I'm joking. Sorry for the humor, but I think it will be a wonderful and meaningful course. Um, and I think it's a question, this question of, I wonder about it because I notice a lot of sort of intense animus towards Christianity in certain quarters, very determined, to really put Christianity into the grave where it belongs and accuse it of all the offenses of the world. And but it is true. Often, when you look at Christians, you don't see Christ. The Catholic Church being the biggest owner of the United States, and you see a lot of power, and you see a lot of sort of worldly power, and you see a lot of corruption. And anyway, so I guess we can understand that to a certain extent. But
Yeah.
again, what I like about talking to you about this is I feel that you are wanting to get to the essence of the matter, you know, the real importance of whatever the
Yeah.
Christian revelation might be.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is, kind of by itself very, very difficult because there is a lot that's in the way. But hopefully through the course, we can challenge each other and really put each other into question. Not to try to convert anyone to the Christian faith or anything, but maybe just to look at this radical figure, this Jesus Christ, maybe in a bit of a different way. Maybe there's something there that's still with us.
Okay.
And maybe there's something we can put into question about our own lives. And that way that might help to disarm some of all of this hatred, because perhaps we can see really where it's coming from as opposed to how it's being expressed.
Mhm. So maybe I have one more question for you, Luke. I'd like to know how you came to that conclusion, like how you got there. How you got to this view of Christ and of Jesus, and uh, what happened? In a nutshell.
You know, that's a good question, but maybe I don't know. It was there were a number of things, but I suppose the thing that stood out for me is in my own journey, particularly with the Gurdjieff work. There is this point, and I felt myself, in a sense, in the Gospels, almost in Christ's shoes, because when one goes through a spiritual journey, there are all of these things that you need to give up, things that you need to confront, things that you need to confess. Otherwise, you can't go on. You get stuck. And at some point, there is a death and there is a rebirth. It may not be in the big sense, but there's certainly lots of little deaths and lots of little rebirths. And they're often followed by some form of crucifixion. I go through an agony. I go through a remorse of a kind that is excruciating. But if I can endure it, then something arises in me, a new light, a new fire maybe. And so for me, when I reflect back on the Gospels and what Christ went through and the disciples, I start to see a reflection that this inner journey, despite how it might be described, I found it intensely compact in the Gospels, that in a way, for us all to be reborn or transformed, we all go through a birth and a death and a rebirth. And he exemplified that. But not only outwardly in terms of the cross and the crucifixion and how he lived his life, but also I see that if I go through that, at least in some small way, that it does enable a certain quality of energy. Something is able to live within me that wasn't able to before. And so some of these questions around, well, if Christ, this Son of God, this divine man, had all that in himself and willingly put himself through that, then what forces and energies were unleashed? What energies and forces were brought forth into the world as I have experienced in my own small way?